On today's episode, we sit down with Stephanie to ask the question, how do you know if your insurance broker is actually advocating for you?
At M2 Technology, we're on a mission to make IT accessible to everyone. Join us on our journey to demystify the ever-evolving world of business technology. Are you ready to get unplugged?
Welcome to IT Unplugged. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Stephanie.
Stephanie, I'm excited to talk about insurance today, risk, manufacturing specifically, and I'm really kind of curious. You know, you're a senior risk management consultant at USI. How did you get into this role? How did you get into insurance?
First of all, I love that question. Thank you for asking. It's a funny story. I spent 13 years working for one of the largest logistics supply chain organizations out there. Spent my time doing sales and consulting on business solutions. I really worked hard to position myself as a trusted advisor in the sense of how can we help your business best, right? And so all I knew was manufacturing distributors, what they did, how they moved products, and I thought I'd be doing that the rest of my career. And there's a saying in insurance, actually, that I learned now that I'm in it, about insurance. No one finds insurance. Insurance finds you. That's exactly what happened in my case. And a funny story is my husband actually works for USI as well. He is an employee benefits consultant. And so he had done some talking in the office, and the opportunity came to me, fell in my lap, literally some interviews later, and I was all of a sudden in insurance. It was never on my, plan.
Yeah.
But, I can't tell you how happy I am that I made the decision, because really I see my career, it came full circle. Mm-hmm. I was in the role of positioning, whether it was a warehouse assessment, redesign projects, automation, equipment, system integrations, things of all those natures, right, and investments that companies were making. And now I'm on this other side working with the same types of industries, but helping them protect those very things. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool how it all transpired, and here I am, and I'm loving it.
Yeah,
so.
It's so neat that you have that previous experience, and then you also mentioned trust, and I feel like we're going to talk a lot about trust during this episode. But to have that experience and then like move in, maybe on the other side, of the equation somewhere. But speaking of manufacturing, there's certain risk, operationally and as a company, that's different in manufacturing than other industries that are out there. So, can you kind of expand on that? I think a little bit to maybe the manufacturer owners that are out there that are saying like, well, why is my vertical different than the other ones?
Yeah, absolutely. And manufacturing is unique. I think it's such a special industry for our country and Wisconsin especially. There's so many of them, and they run our economy, mm-hmm. really, when you think about it. So to think of a manufacturing facility down and operations halted for any reason is kind of scary to think about. And so it impacts a lot of different avenues and a lot of different connections, a lot of different other companies too. So when we look at manufacturers, we look at it very holistically in the sense of all the potential pitfalls that could happen. And right now, with automation being so, prevalent in manufacturing, and all of the integrations that go into that, there's a lot of interconnectivity. And so just because you have a loss maybe on the property side, a lot of that can impact other avenues of the business itself too. So it's looking at that, holistic view of a manufacturer and understanding that because they are so intertwined with our economy and what they do, we want to make sure that they're always made whole and they can continue their operations. So for me, it's a passion to helping them and make sure that they're doing what they can to protect them and their operations to continue going. But also, there's key elements, I think, in manufacturing that stick out to me. The supply chain side of a manufacturing operation and how many nodes that touches at any given point, right? Yeah. And how much information is flowing amongst different organizations that play a part, suppliers, customers, it could be, all different avenues. I think about that a lot, and I think that's a challenging conversation to have because not everybody has the experience from the insurance standpoint to talk to some of those things, right? And so I think that's what I love about having an expertise and dealing directly with that industry because I've played in that space in other avenues, and now I can bring that to light and call out exposures that maybe they weren't even aware of.
Yeah, well, I can tell your expertise just from like speaking on it, because now I'm sitting here going, oh yeah, the supply chain. Okay, so if this doesn't get here and it's interconnected, then you have a risk of loss, and maybe another factor that's like 3 pieces down the way, right? So that's interesting. You've talked about like interconnectedness as well. So we've had previous conversations where you're talking about data and analytics and how that's driving decisions, and you kind of just mentioned before, like, downtime. That's like the worst word in the world, right? In manufacturing. And sometimes I think even owners or different people are like, oh yeah, if something breaks, like one thing breaks, oh yeah, we're down. But it's tough to, it's tough to quantify it, I think, sometimes. We work with some manufacturers that say it's going to cost us $80,000 an hour every single time that we're down. And other places are like, if we're down, that's bad, and that's it. And that's as far as it goes. So how does USI, and like, how do you specifically leverage data and analytics to make better informed decisions when it comes to risk?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's what's changing the industry for us too, in the conversations we're having. One of the main reasons I came to USI was the tools and access to data that we had. We basically have created our pool of data from all of our clients and utilize that to benchmark against, right, and help our the companies we're speaking with understand where they fall in comparison to their peers. So it allows us to create a really good starting point with a company that we're first meeting with. We can help them understand where they fit. But then in addition, now we're going to take that data and we're going to help provide recommendations based on what's happening in the industry and what's driving results. A lot of the ROI and analytics that we look at too is not so much just on the coverages, right? I mean, everybody knows you got your property, your casualty, your cyber, your whatever it could be. And that, yes, that's a big part of insurance, but what comes after, right? So how do we prepare you to avoid potential losses? How do we find solutions to help you do business better in regards to the insurance and how to control premiums? So those solutions we've designed and created as a result of the data that we've been compiling, because now we know where the common, claims coming from. And then how do you address that? Oh, here's a solution for that, and let's get that going. So, not every solution's free of charge, right? So that's where we use the information that we have to generate ROI. And that ROI is not only just for the immediate, purchase or investment in that, but then 5 years down the road, what projection can we estimate? And our tools do that for our clients. I think it gives them added comfort in knowing that we have the capabilities to do that. And it makes me feel better. It makes me sleep better to know that it's not just my brain or my knowledge or my experience that's telling them what to do, right? It's data. It's data telling them. And it's telling them exactly what that result should look like.
I think there's so much value in that too, of having up-to-date data that you're giving to a client. I mean, I just think of a normal, quarterly business review where it's like, yep, everything's good. But how much different that is when a partner comes forward and says, hey, here's what we're seeing with these different clients, or, we have this large data pool and here's where we think maybe we should pivot or we should do this. And, it's not always the status quo.
Right.
So that's interesting, because I don't know if every place has that as you kind of go forward. And, one of the other things that you mentioned before was being unbiased in solutions. And for me, when I first heard that, I'm like, what do you mean? You just go with USI, right? You're from USI. That's how it's got to be. So can you kind of, like, maybe for us laymen's out there that aren't fully comprehending everything insurance risk, what does that kind of mean when USI or you aren't biased in your solution design?
Well, I know, it just history says, right, when you get your insurance agent because they take you out on the golf course and you're going to chat it up and you get along and you guys are friends. There's a level of trust there because it's a relationship that you have, right? And now to be able to come in, especially when you're new to an organization, they don't know you from the other guy, right? You have an opportunity now to utilize the tools that we have and bring in reasons, hard facts, right, as to why these recommendations are on the table, excuse me, and why we know what we're talking about, right? Because if you've never heard of USI before, or you've never heard of my name before, who am I to tell you that, hey, by the way, you need to look at XYZ, right? And so for me to have an unbiased viewpoint on how we look at insurance is important, because let's say something does occur. You could have the strongest relationship and buddy as you want, and that's awesome. But do you know if the coverage is going to apply and actually work for you? Sure. And that's, I think, what I, as a business owner, if I was one, I put myself in their shoes all the time, and I would want to know that, yes, I know what I'm doing, but also here's the information to back that up and the data behind it, right? So it just adds a level of, credibility, I would say, to what we do.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'm not a large manufacturing business, but my insurance was through a person for a long time. My wife goes, why do you have them doing your insurance? I'm like, oh, because my dad had them doing their insurance. And it's like a legacy thing. And you're just like, yeah, this guy does insurance. And then it just keeps on moving down. And it has been, though, like a relationship-based thing. And companies I work, why do we choose them? It's like a buddy kind of thing. So I'm curious, how do you balance the relationship aspect and the data aspect? Because I feel like and I could be wrong, but my impression is the personal relationship has like weighed in so much. So how do you break that misconception and say like, hey, we're going to take care of you, we'll still take you on the golf course, but like we're actually going to take care of you, and here's the proof behind it.
Yeah, it's really hard. I relate it to a real breakup. Like it's truly breaking up with somebody, and no one wants to do that, So our approach is really behind the information that we bring to the table, the facts, the data, that support our recommendations as to why you should make that change, or maybe you are starting to think you should make that change because of those reasons. Now it comes to, how do I break up with the person I've been with for 10 years, you know? And we help with that, right? We help with I think anytime you can go into explaining to someone why you got to end the relationship, if you have data and information to back that up, like so-and-so, hey, we've been together for 10 years and you never really brought XYZ to the table, right? I mean, that helps that conversation. It's still not easy. Yeah. And we come up against that all the time, but eventually, if the facts prevail and the value hopefully is what they're seeing in the end. And that's, makes you feel better. Every
decision is emotional, like when you're dealing with people, right? And I think one of the aspects is like, as a business owner, you also have a responsibility to your employees. So it's like, it's not fun to have that. And we provide breakup emails at M2 Technology. It sounds so bad, but it is. It's like, okay, how do we let someone else down easy and then facilitate the change? So, it's like when I got to go get my hoodie, it's not that bad,
Well, and it's hard to negate or like go against facts too. So like if you supply them with the information as to why this makes sense, I mean, then they have the ammo they need to,
Yeah, and it's easier, but still, it's always emotional.
It's never easy.
Yeah. Well, you kind of talked about facts and different things like that, and I think when it comes to scale, there's a lot of benefit of having a lot of clients that are the same size or in the same industry or doing the same thing. So, I guess I'm kind of curious, when it comes to USI and you're dealing with manufacturing clients that are very similar to one another, and you can use that data. Do you have any kind of examples of how that has helped other companies, maybe made that decision, or just like helped them overall when it comes to their risk and insurance?
I think that's a strong point when it comes to the team behind myself, right? And behind the rest of us that work here as agents at USI. We have a world of experts behind us that sit and help with specific areas of concern. So I think of one off the bat. I had a large client we brought on last year, and they had so many challenges with the property and placing. They were a difficult risk, we call that, just carriers didn't want to deal with it, right? But again, it comes down to the story that you're telling these carriers about that specific client, and how do we build that to be the best risk possible, put them in the best light possible. And so what we do is we, in this scenario, knowing that property was difficult, we leaned on our experts in the property space. We have individuals that have been underwriters before. They've been on that side of the equation. Some of them have expertise in the real estate market in general. So when we can leverage all of the insight that they can bring, it helps us come to the table with a story to these carriers as to why they need to consider placing this risk. In this case, however, our client now, they were dropped by their previous carrier.
Oh, wow.
So we
Okay.
had not only the fact that they didn't have coverage in about 8 months' time from the moment we met them, but we also, we knew it was going to be a challenge to find a replacement. So right now, their entire program is made up of 15 carriers.
Wow.
So when you think about the scope of what that means, that took a lot of power behind the scenes too, to know who to go to, how to work out, different program options, and how do we create the program to still fit their needs, still get them the coverage they need. It's really complex, but hey, it's a solution. It's a solution that they weren't able to find with another, partner in the past. And so I can't do my job without having teams of individuals to support me, because I can't know everything, right? But it does make me feel better that I can lean on those individuals, and we're going to get a solution no matter what it might be. And this goes back to the question that you asked, like as far as how do we leverage other similar sized businesses and experiences that they've had throughout our time with them, and how do we apply that then to the one that we're dealing with at the moment. So that goes into, okay, are they equal of size? Are they in equal industries? All of that plays a part. But then what other insights do we bring, just knowing what that experience looked like in the past? How do we build upon that to bring a solution that's going to work for this customer? So.
Yeah, that's, for somebody that doesn't have the insight into it, you might just think like, oh yeah, big company, this many people, this risk level, like you just cut a number and that's it. And like hearing this, that there was 15 different carriers, is so different than the perception that I would normally have kind of like put together in my own head. So really interesting.
And I think it's outside the norm of what you typically see when you're in the insurance conversations with someone, because a lot of times they don't have the bandwidth behind them to bring those different options to the table, right? So I feel fortunate to be a part of a company that I could pick up the phone and I could have an expert on the phone to talk to about these things, and then also share experiences from others who manage companies similar to the one I'm working with in that moment, right? And we share ideas. And every week, my team and I, we meet and we discuss kind of what we're working on. And that way we can lean on each other for insight and recommendations of where to go next, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's so awesome, because it doesn't matter how big a company is, there's still, like, if you don't have intentionalities behind removing the silos, like you could have 1,000 people that never talk to each other, and then you just have the knowledge of like that one individual, right? Because you're not leaning on those resources. So it's great that you guys are leveraging that. With that being said, you've talked about a little bit of holistic approach, looking at an entire company. I'm sure having 15 carriers on one thing, you have to look holistically, but then you're also throwing out like ROI. And for me, when I think of insurance, I think of the ROI. I'm like, yeah, there's an ROI if something really bad happens, and like that's where my brain goes. So can you break that misconception for me?
Yeah, you said two things: holistic and ROI. So holistically, we don't just look at a business and say, what coverages are we going to put in play? We don't go through the renewal process of just the typical meet before renewal, almost like auto renew, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been through those situations. Our job is to know your business inside and out. The reason we do that, and the reason why we want to get to know the people that work there and their processes and what they're doing, is because all of that tells a story about your organization, and that's what we're using to leverage with carriers and negotiate on your behalf. I think a lot of times it comes into who in the carrier world that you leverage kind of that relationship, but USI, we're big enough that we can throw that weight around. We already have the relationships. Now how do we make you different from all the other guys, all the other companies in your same space? How do we make you shine, right? And I think holistically, we got to look at all avenues. We got to look at what your priorities and goals are, where you're going in the next 5 years. We got to understand what's most important to you that I'm speaking to, but also to your team, to those others that are a part of maybe the safety groups. Like, how do we leverage all of that to also make sure that not only are you getting the best program for your company to protect, but also you're leveraging all the solutions, tools, and access to things that are going to help everybody do better at their job. And when it comes to insurance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got their things they got to do, but there are people that play important roles into how the premiums come out each year. So that holistically, that's what we look at. And then the ROI piece of it is, I got to somehow show you why you got to do these things, or at least consider them, right? And so to have tools where we can, in front of the customer, say, hey, let's look at your workers' comp, for example. Let's look at all the trips. You seem to have a lot of trips and falls, okay? That's or back strains, whatever the case is. This is what other companies have done to reduce that risk and cut down those claims, right? And these are the partners that we have behind USI, or that we've partnered up with, that provide an actual tangible solution, piece of equipment, or whatever the case might be, to combat that. Okay, great. It cost me a few thousand, maybe 100,000. Who knows what the cost is? That's a lot to take. But here's the ROI you can expect from it. In 5 years' time, this is how it's going to reduce the claims. This is what that means for costs. And then this is why, it makes sense. So to be able to do that live with customers right there on a screen is like insane.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, I think that actually sounds like it'd be fun to talk insurance, when you do something like that. And, I never really thought of, like a company selling our company value, vision, and what we're doing to carriers to get a better deal. Like, that wasn't even anywhere in my brain to then think that this is what someone's doing on my behalf. We get our taxes done every year, right? And we just had them done. And funny enough, we came in one year. I'm like, this looks a little bit wrong, and it was our fault, but we're like, shouldn't we be getting something like for this back? And it's like, oh, what, did something change? We're like, yeah, we had a kid. You know what I mean? And it was like, it was one of those things that, shame on us, we didn't say anything. We only see this person once a year. We're like, oh yeah, we didn't, like, this is essentially just like checking the boxes, and that's what we're paying for. But there was nobody like advocating or asking those deep questions. And for you guys to be doing that, and especially at the scale that you're doing, it seems like it could make a huge difference.
Well, and I'll add to that then, because when we talked about the renewal and how, sometimes you feel like you're on auto renew and you see them once a year, right? I mean, that's kind of what the traditional model is. We make it a point that we have an entire client calendar that we use. We know when work comp experience mods are going to come up, right? And the next year that's going to change, and when that happens. So we need to meet at, X months before to make sure we're talking about claims and how do we impact it to make sure if there's changes we got to make, we do it in a timely fashion, right? Or we do mid-year reviews with all of our clients. So we meet 6 months before renewal. At that time, we're looking at all of the property data and information. We're looking at the claims information. We're looking at things that are going to impact that premium in 6 months from now. Why? Because some of these things take time, right? So if we have to bring partners in to look at maybe safety culture and some of the things you could improve there, so that we can explain that to the carrier that it's been done before renewal, that just makes you a better risk, as they say. And so that's our job. Our job is to make sure we're the communicator between the two, right? Between the carrier and the client, but always on the benefit of the client, not the carrier.
Well, speaking of better risk, being in IT, we work with a lot of manufacturing companies, and and then other companies have internal IT. So I guess in general, what are some of the things that IT individuals, professionals, companies can be doing, whether that's documentation, whether that's certain software, to lessen the cybersecurity premiums that might be in place at these companies?
I'll say there are 5 elements that they like to look at. Number one being multi-factor authentication, right? And having that level of security on your network to make sure that you're combating any of those risks. It is surprising to me in this day and age that there are still companies that don't use them, and that's
Sure.
fine. Everybody's got their reason, but I think it comes down to a lot of companies don't have an IT team or resource on site, right? Sometimes they're contracting out. So it makes it difficult because they don't have someone of expertise right there to ask the questions and plan accordingly.
Yeah.
So I think IT resources out there, if you're working with companies, if you can help educate them on the whys, right, behind these investments of whether it's an MFA or maybe it's the email security
Sure.
or it's backups to the cloud or whatever you choose to do, these elements are, part of the story we're telling to carriers. So the more documentation or information that you're providing, whether that's on an annual basis, but kind of documenting what you're doing for that company, will help them articulate or at least provide us the information, because then we can relay that to the carrier and build that risk to look really, really good.
No, I think this conversation is really beneficial for anybody that's in IT that's like looking at this. Because funny enough, before we started this podcast, I got a call back. It's like, we want everything except multi-factor, because there's like a little inconvenience, right? Sometimes. But I think that goes back to things are emotional and like, where can you leverage the data? So if I say, okay, you don't want this multi-factor, that's $3 a seat or something like that. But then I go, oh, but it'll save you, this much on your premiums. It becomes kind of a no-brainer. We'll go back to the table and address this and stuff like that. But it's once again that silo thing, right? And making sure that you're being a true partner. So it's not just, hey, we've gotten our cybersecurity policy back. We need MFA, it looks like, and that's it. And it's always so reactive versus the alternative where we can bring value. And I think there needs to be more collaboration between.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of partnerships. I think that's one of the things we do, and one of the questions I always ask too is if you have an IT team on site, or do you outsource that, who that is, right? Because if there are things we want to dive deeper into, we want to understand who they're working with so that we can work with them too. I mean, we can at least help have those conversations, be a seat at the table to help dive into the other factors as to why that's a good idea, right?
Yeah.
And so with the cyber, one of the biggest things is there's a level of coverage you can get access to based on what you have in place, right? All those parameters. So you want, if you're going to pay for the cyber insurance, you want to have the coverages that are going to be needed when things happen, right? So the number one and number two issues or risks or attacks that we see are data breaches, and which are, even phishing scams, and then you have your ransomwares. Those are the two largest that we're seeing out there impact businesses, and manufacturers can be completely shut down. So it's like these are real things taking place, but I don't think enough is out there education-wise on cyber yet. I think there is this knowledge that I need it, but you don't know the level of elements that you need to have, right? And there's a third-party element to that too. You got to think about all the other things that companies are connected to, where that information can also be hacked and impact your business. So.
It's the whole supply chain, right? And every vendor that you work with and different things like that can shut things down. And we started about putting a dollar amount on downtime, right? So it all kind of comes full circle. But I'm happy you're out there advocating for these manufacturers and helping them out. And hopefully, at M2 Technology, we can do our part as well. But, with that being said, like, I think this has been a great conversation where, at least for me even, and we've talked before, so even again, it's like, wow, these companies that are out there are really advocating and educating, and that's what we need, especially in this area with such a heavy manufacturing presence.
Yeah, I always say insurance is boring, right? It really is. No one wants to talk about it. But when you can relate it back to why, right, and what's important to them in their business, that's where the connection's made, and that's where you can get that passion.
That's where we can get the fun in
Love
insurance.
It. Make it fun again.
Thanks for being here, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for watching IT Unplugged. If you are looking for anything related to risk insurance, reach out to Stephanie. She's here to advocate for you. And thanks so much. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things. We'll see you next time.